Welcome back. All right, so in my continuing look at teams that missed the playoffs this year, we're up to the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers, of course, were right in the hunt right until the very end, and they were in control of their own destiny with a few weeks left of the season. They couldn't get there. They just couldn't cross that line and finish in the playoffs. They finished 38, 33, and 11, so 87 points for them this season. That's up from 75 last year. I don't think we're going to see another 12-point improvement from this team, but who knows? This was a bit of a surprise this year that they finished above 500. Before the season started, many, including myself, felt that the Flyers were probably going to be bottom five in the NHL. They were definitely in a rebuild. And then John Tortorella, using his mantra of hard work and shot blocking, they stayed in the hunt. They did pretty well. I think that style of hockey wore the team down. At least that was my belief from watching them play all their games. But we'll see how things go next season, and I would imagine John Tortorella stays behind the bench. I know that's the plan. Plans can change over a summer, obviously, but yeah, he'll probably stay behind the bench and have some input with Danny Briere on what the plan is going forward. One thing I admire with the Flyers is that at no point during this run this season, when it looked like they could finish in the playoffs, did they decide, okay, we're going to go out and rent some guys at the deadline and try to make a push for this. They stuck to the plan. They absolutely stuck to the plan to look at the long-term picture and make sure that the future is really bright, and they weren't willing to sacrifice any of the future for the present. Their goal scoring, predictably bad, 27th in the NHL. They definitely had trouble finding guys who could get that finish, right? You have Konechny, you have Tippett, and then outside of that, there were some mixed results. Goals allowed, they were 18th in the NHL this season, so almost halfway, almost at the top half, close, but still in the bottom half of the league. Goaltending was a question mark. Goaltending kind of still is a question mark, sort of. Although I do think that Ersson and Fedotov end up being the tandem next year. It's been 4 years now, 4 seasons that this team has missed the playoffs. It is interesting to see them go through this rebuild process. I do think that they end up missing the playoffs again next year because we're nowhere near seeing this team acquire and get all those young prospects together on the roster and go from there. The notable of their record at the end of the season, they lost 10 of their last 12, and once the wheels fell off, there wasn't any coming back. And it's going to be interesting to see next season how this team looks and whether or not we see some improvement or if things continue to be kind of middling. Maybe they stay in the hunt again. And again, if John Tortorella can get everybody to buy in and play his system, they absolutely could be in the hunt right up until the end of the season. Again, the draft lottery, we are looking at the first team on this playlist that cannot draft first. The best they can do is second. They have a 5.1% chance of drafting second. They have a 0.1% chance of drafting third or fourth. So very little chance they move up. 12th, an excellent chance they draft 12th, 85.7%. Remembering that the draft lottery is on Tuesday, right? It's on the 7th. So I won't be doing draft lottery odds once we reach that point. It'll just be draft position, but highly likely Philadelphia ends up 12th. 13th, 8.9% chance they finish 13th, and 0.2% chance they draft 14th in the upcoming draft. So not likely they move down. About a 9.1% chance altogether that they move down. But for Philadelphia, it's not considered to be a really deep or fantastic draft. That was last year. So we'll see what they do with that draft pick if it is 12th. And again, it just feels like a draft where we could see some draft picks get traded in the first round. So when we look at their top scorers, Travis Konechny was number one. 76 games, 33 goals, 35 assists, 68 points. He's an excellent player, still relatively young, and I think his best years could be ahead of him. Tippett, excellent scorer, 78 games, 28 goals, 25 assists, 53 points. Owen Tippett seems to enjoy it in Philadelphia, and it just seems like that's a mutually beneficial relationship. Farabee, 82 games, 22 goals, 28 assists, 50 points for Joel Farabee. Farabee's been good on and off, but I do think that if you're a Flyers fan, you probably want about 10 or 15 more points out of Farabee over a full season. And then you get into the youngsters that are on the roster, so age 22 and under. So Cam York does not qualify. Forrester, 77 games, 20 goals, 13 assists, 33 points. Forrester, 20 goals, that's about right. I would say he could hit 25 next year. Bobby Brink, I think there's more offense there than what we've seen at the NHL level so far. 57 games, 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points. Where it gets interesting is Jamie Drysdale. So in the Cutter Gauthier trade, they pick up Drysdale, who is going to be a very good defenseman, I think. But while he started well, he then got hurt, and his overall numbers end up not being fantastic. 24 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in his time with the Flyers. Drysdale's going to be counted on next year to run, at the very least, I would think, the second unit power play. He may end up on the first unit. That's going to be interesting. And then Andre, he played 4 games this year, didn't have a point, but he's got a bright future for the Flyers as well. Now, goaltending, the trial of Team Canada members, including Carter Hart, pulled away the goaltender that arguably was their best goaltender this past season. And because that trial date isn't set to start until after the start of the next season, I would not be surprised to see Carter Hart not getting a qualifying offer from the Flyers and ending up an unrestricted free agent. In fact, for any players who are involved in this trial, I would think they become unrestricted free agents until we see that trial come to an end, and then we'll see where they end up. But that would lead to Ersson probably ends up being the starter next year, especially if you're not of the mind that this team's going to be contending for a playoff spot. 23-19-7 record, .890 save percentage. At times, Ersson looked great, and at times he looked very mediocre. So, consistency an issue there. Sandstrom, who is a pending UFA, 1-2 with an .823 save percentage. Fedotov, who they've signed to extension, 0-1-1 with an .811 save percentage. It's a very small sample size, but based on the money they gave him, the plan seems to be he's either your starter or he's a 1B. Either way, it's probably Ersson and Fedotov that end up being the tandem, unless something changes in the offseason, which is entirely possible. Now, on their way up, there are some good prospects in the system outside of the young guys who are already on the roster. Matvei Michkov, of course, is the number one prospect. Right winger, the question becomes, when does he come over? When does he come over and play? We know when he's able to come over, but will he come over is the, like, when his KHL contract's up, does he come over and play for the Flyers, or does he decide to stay there? And that's part and parcel of why Russian players may not get drafted as early as expected, but Michkov getting drafted by the Flyers, he said he wanted to go there, and so they drafted him. So that would lead me to believe that once his KHL contract's up, he probably comes over and plays for the Flyers. I'd be surprised if he didn't. Now, outside of Michkov, you also have Oliver Bonk, defenseman, and he's highly thought of. And then there's a goaltender as well, Alexei Kolosov. So we'll see what happens there, because again, this is a team that could use a good young goaltender. Kolosov's right there, so we'll see how long it is before he comes over. Maybe Fedotov and Kolosov become the guys for Philadelphia, and maybe they'll look to have like what Varlamov and Sorokin have been to the Islanders, that kind of thing. They're pending unrestricted free agents. Not a lot here. Guryanov probably goes to market. Eric Johnson, rental at the deadline. Mark Stahl just there on a 1-year deal. And as mentioned before, Sandstrom, pending UFA. The pending RFAs, previously mentioned, Carter Hart, which I don't think they qualify him. I think he becomes unrestricted. Zamula and Bobby Brink, also players who are on expiring deals. Zamula was good for them, I thought, on the blue line. I wouldn't mind seeing him get a 3 or 4 year deal at a decent cap hit, obviously. But the cap is going to be interesting to watch with them because, according to CapSpace, they're cap friendly. Their cap space on July the 1st is $503,572. But Ryan Ellis is on IR, not LTIR, and Ellis's cap hit is $6.25 million until 2027. So if they get up near the cap, they could just put Ellis on LTIR, and they get that much more cap space to work with. But there's not a lot of cap space in Philly right now. Much more cap space after 2025, so we'll see what happens then, but we're a year out from that. They have added some draft picks to their draft list. The Florida first-round draft pick this year. Columbus' second-round draft pick, though that's conditional. LA and Vegas, both of them, fifth-round draft picks traded to Philly. St. Louis' sixth-round draft pick belongs to Philly. 2025, they have a conditional first from the Colorado Avalanche next year, and they have Anaheim's second-round draft pick and Carolina's fifth. So they've been adding some picks, and I would expect that to continue this summer. I'd be very surprised if they don't pick up some extra draft picks along the way. The one thing is, with the amount of cap space they have, I don't think they're going to be picking up, bad contracts and all that because they don't have a ton of cap space. Although, When we get into these contracts, Johansson's right there. And it's already been said Johansson may never play again. That's another $4 million for one more year for Johansson that could be parked on LTIR. So you get a little over $10 million in cap space there. But then that's $10 million in cap space between those two through LTIR. And again, LTIR's, it's a complicated setup, but I would think Johansson ends up there with Ellis. Both of them former Nashville players. Couturier, $7.75 million till 2030. We know Couturier had a bit of an up and down year. He had a really good, strong start, and then it petered out towards the end. We know he was a healthy scratch. There was a lot of debate about why. So Couturier, I would say it's valid to question, what Couturier's future is, how much longer he's going to be a Flyer. But with the amount of time on that contract, I think they got to work it out. That's my prediction. Atkinson, $5.875 million contract for one more year. He had a good, strong start, petered out as well. Sanheim, $6.25 million until 2031. They almost traded that contract last summer to St. Louis. Instead, he had a pretty darn good year with Philly. He might be more tradable this summer than he was last summer, so we'll see if they try to make that move again. And then you got Ristolainen at $5.1 million in a cap hit until 2027. I think that's a contract they would love to move, but they're not going to want to add draft picks or prospects as sweeteners to move that contract. It's something you don't want to do if your team's in a rebuild. So they're kind of stuck. I think they're kind of stuck with some of these contracts, which definitely leaves them closer to the salary cap ceiling than I think they would want to be right now going through a rebuild. But again, adding draft picks, smart move. We'll see if they add more between now and the draft, which is, of course, next month, and should be fun to watch. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Will the Flyers be better? Will they be the same? Or will they regress? Will they end up more in the 75-point range next year? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.